Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of You're Always Wrong and I'm Always Right. And today I'm going to explain in detail why Thomas DeLauer is wrong about soy. Just recently, he put out a video trying to urge everyone to avoid eating soy at all costs, even though it is a healthy and nutritious food, and as is typical with Thomas, he cherry-picked research, misrepresented the science, so we're just going to go through his video and rebut each of his claims point by point.
Look, I'm going to come right out and level with you. I don't want to demonize a bunch of foods. That's not my style. I'm more about promoting positivity and what you should eat. But there's some foods that just deserve their own video, so you can really learn why you should avoid them. And when it comes to soy, the odds are just stacked against them. They got so many things going against them. You should not be putting this stuff in your body. We're going to start this video with the estrogen side of things, talking about it from a women perspective and a men perspective. So first off, estrogen as far as women are concerned. Okay, soy is a phytoestrogen. Okay, a phytoestrogen means that it's structurally similar to estrogen, although it's not literally estrogen. But as far as it's concerned inside the body, it still binds to estrogen receptors, and the body thinks that it is estrogen. Okay, what this ends up doing is it ends up pounding the estrogen receptor with too much estrogen. And there's a lot of studies that indicate that this is not exactly the best thing for a female. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition published a study that took a look at over 76,000 women and indicated that there is an increased risk of breast cancer associated with high soy consumption, soy isoflavones. Okay, that's just one piece of the equation, but it's standout and it's large and it's impactful.
Alright, so we're already on to our first dum-dum. So Thomas is claiming that soy intake increases risk of breast cancer among women, and he thinks that this is because of the estrogenic effect of soy. Well, if you actually take a look at the study he referenced, that's not the case, and things aren't nearly that simple. Alright, so here's the study that Thomas referenced here. Use of dietary supplements containing soy isoflavones and breast cancer risk among women aged 50 or over, a prospective study. So that's the first thing I want to point out here, dietary supplements. So these women weren't eating soy foods, they were taking soy-based dietary supplements that have been promoted as natural alternatives to menopausal hormone therapy. So these women were not eating food, they weren't eating soy foods, they were taking dietary supplements that are specifically for menopausal hormone therapy. So that is one factor that you want to consider here. This really isn't enough to demonize soy foods. And the biggest dum-dum here, the stupidest mistake Thomas made, was that he claimed that ingestion of soy isoflavones or these isoflavone supplements were associated with an increased risk of breast cancer, and he thought that this was because soy has an estrogenic effect and the estrogens in the soy bombard the breast cancer cells, encouraging it to grow and proliferate. Now, the study actually found the exact opposite. Again, if you actually read the study, compared with never using soy supplements, the hazard ratios associated with current use of soy supplements were 0.92 for all and 0.78 for estrogen receptor ER positive cancers. Now, just so you all understand this better, there are different types of breast cancer. Certain breast cancers have hormone receptors like estrogen receptors, and when they are bombarded with estrogen, they grow and proliferate, and these are referred to as estrogen receptor positive or ER positive breast cancers. So if you expose these cancers to estrogen, they will grow and proliferate, and there are different therapies to prevent these cancer cells from having access to estrogen. And there are also ER-negative breast cancers. So these are breast cancers that don't have estrogen receptors and will not be affected by these hormones. Now, in the study, they found that exposure to soy isoflavones or soy estrogens reduces your risk of estrogen receptor positive breast cancers. So this completely contradicts what Thomas DeLauer said, where he said, the reason soy increases your risk of cancer is because it has so much estrogen and it bombards these estrogen receptors in the breast cancer cell. Notice how when he made this video, he didn't even show the results. He didn't explain the results of the study. He just quickly scrolled down and said, oh yeah, it found an association with breast cancer. No, that's not what the study said. They didn't even mention this in the conclusion. All they said was that there are opposing associations with soy supplements and ER positive and ER negative breast cancer risk. So Thomas I have to assume that either you're completely illiterate and you can't understand plain simple English, or you deliberately lied. You looked at the study, assumed that most people wouldn't be able to interpret this, and you just completely lied about the findings of the study. Now, what's interesting is the study did find a strong positive association between soy isoflavone intake and estrogen receptor negative breast cancers, which doesn't really make any sense because they're estrogen receptor negative breast cancers. They're not affected by these hormones. They did also find an association between family history of breast cancer and isoflavone consumption. So current users of soy isoflavones with a family history of breast cancer were at an increased risk of breast cancer, whereas women without a family history of breast cancer were protected by soy isoflavone supplementation. And they also found that women who are menopausal, there is an association with soy isoflavone supplementation and breast cancer, but those who are not menopausal, there was a strong protective effect of soy isoflavone consumption. And again, they mentioned this in the conclusion. There is opposing associations of soy supplementation and these different types of breast cancer. And they state, our results also caution against the use of these supplements in women with a family history of breast cancer. So there may be a number of reasons for why you're seeing these opposing associations between isoflavone intake and risk of breast cancer. For one thing, again, these people were taking dietary supplements. They weren't eating whole soy foods. So there might be differences with the supplements they're taking. They might be dosed differently. They may be taking them for different durations of time for different reasons. Menopausal status, age, family history of breast cancer all seems to play a role here. So for Thomas to claim that the study proves soy increases risk of breast cancer, that is a completely inaccurate and dishonest representation of the study findings. And on top of that, it's only one single study. It's only one single prospective cohort that he decided to cherry pick and misrepresent the results of. Ideally, what you want to do here is take a look at meta-analyses that look at a wider range of data. Meta-analyses, they're higher up on the scientific evidence hierarchy, and they have a lower risk of bias. And I was able to find a recent meta-analysis from July of 2020, so just last month, titled Higher Dietary Soy Intake Appears Inversely Related to Breast Cancer Risk, Independent of Estrogen Receptor Breast Cancer Phenotypes. Now, one important difference that I see between this meta-analysis and the study that Thomas DeLauer cited is that this meta-analysis looked at food consumption, so people who are consuming soy foods and not just soy isoflavone supplements. So the people in this meta-analysis, they're consuming things like tofu, soy milk, and they weren't just taking some sort of dietary supplement. So the data in this meta-analysis, the results of this meta-analysis, I think it's more relatable and practical to, a real-life situation. So they included 5 cohorts and 13 case control studies in their analysis, and they found that soy food intake was associated with reduced risk of breast cancer for all women. And interestingly, they found that soy food intake was associated with reduced risk of both ER-positive and ER-negative breast cancers, and they found a greater protective effect of soy food among premenopausal women. So again, Thomas is just cherry-picking research, likely deliberately misrepresenting it just so that he can make some anti-soy video, and he's acting as if this accurately represents the majority of the data on soy intake and breast cancer risk, when, no, pretty consistently you will find soy is protective against breast cancer. So let's move on. He comes up with more stupid reasons not to consume soy.
And with men, there was a study that was published in Cancer and Epidemiological Biomarkers Previews that demonstrated that soy protein consumption led to a significant decrease in testosterone. And then there was another follow-up study that found that men that consumed soy foods ended up having a significantly lower sperm count. Okay, what is happening here? Once again, with men, the estrogen is binding to the estrogen receptor, and it's triggering the decline of testosterone, and it's triggering more aromatization and more creation of more estrogen. So it goes down this vicious circle where we end up really skewing the ratio of the proper hormones we should have as human beings.
All right, so now Thomas is claiming that if you are a man and you consume soy protein supplements, you will dramatically decrease your testosterone levels, and he's referring to this study to support this claim. Well, if you actually read the study, there's no control group. Everyone received the soy treatment. So if there's no control or placebo group to compare these results to, then the study is pretty much meaningless, and you can find randomized trials comparing soy protein supplementation to other protein supplements like whey protein, and not to my surprise, soy protein doesn't appear to reduce testosterone or increase sex hormone binding globulin or estrogen. So again, I think it's pretty obvious that Thomas DeLauer is just cherry picking studies so that he can make this stupid anti-soy video, and he's doing this when there are meta-analyses on this topic. There are meta-analyses on clinical trials, which includes placebo-controlled trials, and yeah, unsurprisingly, they found that soy has no feminizing effects in men, doesn't lower testosterone, doesn't raise estrogen. So not looking good for you, Tom. You're proving yourself to be a liar. And Thomas also claimed that soy food intake or isoflavone consumption, it reduces sperm count in men. Now, he didn't flash the study on screen this time. I don't know why, but this is the study he's referring to. He linked it in the description of his video. It's titled Soy Food and Isoflavone Intake in Relation to Semen Quality Parameters Among Men from an Infertility Clinic. Now, if you read this paper, the study doesn't claim that soy reduces sperm count. It only states that soy and isoflavone consumption reduces sperm concentration. Now, if you actually read the study, they mention several times that soy food and isoflavone intakes were unrelated to sperm count. So, according to this study, soy food, it doesn't affect total sperm count. It only affects sperm concentration, and that's likely because it increases ejaculate volume. So within the volume of sperm that's analyzed, there's less sperm, but the total sperm count is the same. So once again, you are completely misrepresenting research that either you don't understand or you haven't even bothered reading yourself. Or if you've bothered reading it, maybe you're lying. So maybe you should clarify this, Thomas. Are you a liar? Do you not know how to read? Like, which is it?
Soy messes with our hormones. And in this case, we're talking thyroid. Sometimes we see massive increases, sometimes we see decreases. So one study that was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that soy consumption led to a decrease in T3 and T4, our primary thyroid hormones. And then another study that's published in Journal of Endocrinology and Metabolism found that it triggered an increase. And it all depends on the person. So what we're starting to see and what we could kind of imply or hypothesize is that if you are hypothyroid, soy could affect your thyroid in a negative manner that way. And if you're already somewhat hyperthyroid, it could affect you negatively in that manner.
So this is just more stupid nonsense. The studies that Thomas is referring to do not support his claims. And Thomas is claiming that soy intake increases risk of thyroid diseases like hypo or hyperthyroidism, when that's not what these studies show. So Thomas referred to two studies here, and for some reason he only flashed one study on screen. I don't know why he keeps doing that. But both of these studies were just looking at how soy consumption can affect cholesterol metabolism through hormonal pathways. And what they found was, yeah, it does influence thyroid hormone production, but in the study that he actually flashed on screen, it even stated that this is likely not to be, clinically significant at all. And neither of these studies suggest that soy increases risk of thyroid disease. So I don't know what to say about this other than, what's your problem? Why do you keep, flashing studies on screen that you don't even understand? Why do you keep lying?
Next up, we talk about saponins. Now, saponins are what are called an immunological adjuvant. Now, what that means is it triggers inflammation, it triggers the activation of our immune system. Now, when this happens, we have pro-inflammatory cytokines, pro-inflammatory mediators that cascade throughout our body and cause all kinds of issues. The hard part, and according to the Journal of Toxicology, is it also ends up increasing intestinal permeability, which means that we can trigger more inflammation via lipopolysaccharides getting through our gut and into our blood. Okay, the biggest problem with saponins is they're not destroyed during heating. Okay, so you can cook soy to your heart's desire, and it's not going to break down the saponins. You're still going to have this inflammatory response that occurs directly just from the components of soy itself.
So this is arguably the dumbest thing that Thomas DeLauer said in this entire video. So Thomas is claiming that the saponins found in soy have pro-inflammatory effects in the human body. They also increase gut permeability, only increasing to the number of health issues that they can cause in humans. Well, if these compounds in soy causes these ill health effects in humans, why did Thomas reference a rat study? The study was conducted on rats, not human beings. If you want to prove the ill health effects of soy, why are you using rat studies? I don't think I have to explain to anyone that human beings aren't rats. And there are also numerous other problems with the study. So for one thing, they weren't actually able to demonstrate that the saponins themselves are harmful. They actually had to expose the rats to an allergen found in milk called beta-lactoglobulin, and the saponins just increased gut permeability and the uptake of this allergen, but the saponins themselves weren't harmful, so that kind of contradicts his claims that the saponins themselves are pro-inflammatory. And secondly, they didn't even use saponins found from soy. They used saponins found from a gypsphelia plant, which is a type of flowering plant. So the study didn't even have anything to do with soy. And what makes this especially stupid is that there is rodent research on soy saponins. So if you're going to rely on rodent research anyway, why wouldn't you rely on rodent research that uses soy saponins? And this research actually shows massive benefits to soy saponin consumption, showing potent antioxidant activity, which can protect against heart disease, and provide athletic benefits as well, increasing work capacity. So once again, you are deliberately cherry-picking irrelevant research and misrepresenting the findings. You actually cherry-picked a rodent study that didn't even have anything to frickin' do with soy. You are just such a dishonest liar, it blows my mind.
But while we're talking about inflammation, let's talk about the oil that's derived from soy. Soybean oil is pure omega-6. Well, I shouldn't say pure, but it's next to grapeseed oil, the highest omega-6 content oil that's out there. Very fragile oil, very low quality, and it's barely shelf stable, but it's so cheap and so mass produced, we find it in everything, okay? It's omnipresent in just about everything you could imagine, and that's what makes it so darn dangerous. And because it's so unstable and already pro-inflammatory, they usually have to hydrogenate it to even make it more stable. So you have a double whammy of inflammatory oil, plus it's been hydrogenated, turned into a trans fat. Do the math, not good stuff.
So I do agree with Thomas here that soybean oil is not a health food, and especially if it's hydrogenated, you should definitely avoid it. But keep in mind, Thomas DeLauer is an absolute quack. He's promoted butter as a health food. He's advised people not to listen to the American Heart Association and the Scientific Advisory Committee on Nutrition that have recently put out reports proving an indisputable link between saturated fat and heart disease. So yeah, Thomas is sort of right here, but at the same time, he's promoting absolute junk foods as health foods. You shouldn't listen to his advice.
Okay, next thing is going to be oxalates. People constantly complain about oxalates in almonds and spinach. And okay, let me explain what oxalates are. They're really not the biggest deal in the world. Our liver naturally produces oxalic acid, already produces oxalates. Okay, but what oxalates do when they come in an abundance in food form is they chelate minerals. They chelate with magnesium and things like that, and they chelate to them and they bind to them so hard that the enzymes within our body cannot break that bond down. So we end up excreting it in our stool, which means we're not absorbing the minerals. Now, this isn't as profound as people make it sound, but when it's combined with the saponins, combined with the omega-3s, combined with the other just compounding effects of soy, you have a big problem, right?
Sweet, well, this saves me a ton of time. He did not provide any research to support his claims. There is no evidence that soy food consumption increases your risk of things like iron deficiency, mineral deficiencies. So great, we can skip on to the next thing. Thomas doesn't even have any freaking evidence to support his claims.
Which leads me into the next piece, phytic acid. Very similar to oxalates, except phytic acid binds and has a stronger affinity for things like magnesium, which is very important, but it tends to bind to vitamin B12. Now, who is consuming an abundance of soy? Usually vegans that aren't educated on what they're consuming, or vegetarians that aren't really educated on what they're consuming and putting in their body. So they consume an abundance of soy. There's already a significant deficiency in vitamin B12 in a lot of vegans and vegetarians. So then all of a sudden you're stuck with this situation where not only are you not getting B12, the B12 that you are getting in is getting chelated by the phytic acid. Fortunately, phytic acid gets broken down in the fermentation process. So if you're eating tempeh or any kind of fermented soy, that's not as much of an issue.
So again, he said a bunch of nonsense, didn't provide evidence for his claims. That makes things easier for me. So he claimed that phytate consumption inhibits absorption of certain minerals like magnesium, iron. It also inhibits B12 absorption. Well, if you take a look at the most recent study on nutrient intake and status between vegans, vegetarians, and omnivores, vegans actually had a slightly lower risk of magnesium and iron deficiency compared to meat eaters. And vegans were only slightly at a higher risk of B12 deficiency, and that's just because of widespread use of supplementation. I don't know why he would have even mentioned B12 here, because vegans have to take a B12 supplement. There's no natural sources of B12. And people who consume more phytates, they have better bone mineral density. So this is just all nonsense. Like, again, he doesn't provide any evidence for his claims, and the actual research just doesn't support his bullshit.
Okay, then there's another piece. Okay, we're talking about chelation, enzymes, things like that. There are some pretty powerful enzyme inhibitors within soy. Okay, the enzyme inhibitors within soy are sort of the natural protection against parasites for the soy to begin with. Okay, so basically what these enzyme inhibitors do is when a parasite comes into the soybean, it gets acted upon by these enzyme inhibitors and it kills the parasite. Well, this translates over to us too. These enzyme inhibitors basically make it so that our enzymes aren't able to do their job as well, which therefore makes it so that the pancreas has to produce more enzymes to try to digest our food. Well, this puts stress on the pancreas, which isn't good for the body. It puts stress on digestion. It can potentially lead to pancreatic hyperplasia, where the pancreas enlarges because it's working so hard.
So again, Thomas provided absolutely no evidence for his claims. Not only did he not flash any studies on the screen, but I looked in the description of his video. He didn't link any studies suggesting any of this, that soy can cause digestive problems because of enzyme inhibitors, or it can make your pancreas increase in size. So no, Thomas, I think you just enjoy spouting absolute nonsense on camera.
All right, two more things we have to talk about. This next one is wild and it's not discussed a lot. There are unnatural amino acids that are in soy. When soy is processed, it is processed and it creates a new amino acid that is unnatural. It's called lysoalanine, and lysoalanine is not recognized by our body. In fact, only about 40% of it's actually digested and broken down, which, do the math, leaves us with 60% of an unnatural protein, random amino acid, unnatural amino acid floating around through our body. What is it doing? Could be triggering inflammation. At the very least, it's not digesting and causing some discomfort there. It's just a mystery, and the processing is not good.
And again, Thomas provided absolutely no research on this. He wasn't able to demonstrate that this is actually harmful, so all you're doing is just fear-mongering. You're just putting doubt in people's heads and making them fearful about soy for no reason. So thanks again. More just total bullcrap that I can just skip over.
And when we look further at the processing, it leads us to number 10, which is the use of hexane. Hexane is a solvent that they use to dehull the soy. Okay, now it doesn't sound too bad until you realize that this is what's used in shoemaking, in furniture making, to sort of help make the process easier and help dehull stuff and strip things and stuff like that. Okay, here's what's wild. There's no real FDA regulation on how much hexane is safe in soybean, right? In soybeans or soybean oil, right? But when they look at fish, they say, okay, fish are allowed to have 5 parts per million hexane. Well, soy has 21 parts per million hexane. But because there's no regulation, nobody knows this.
So it should come as no surprise that Thomas DeLauer is wrong once again, and I think he's deliberately giving out this misinformation just so that he can keep fear-mongering about soy. So for one thing, he made it sound as if, hexane use is just common in soy food production, like it's in everything. He mentioned that it's used to dehull the plant. That's not what it's used for. So hexane is a chemical that's used to separate oil from the rest of the plant. So if you are going to find hexane in any soy products, it's most likely going to be just an oil, which you should avoid anyway, but you might also be able to find it in some like isolated soy protein supplements, things like that. because hexane is used to, again, separate the oil from these foods. And I'm just going to read off from an article by Berkeley Wellness that goes into more detail about hexane in soy foods. According to the Soy Foods Association of North America, hexane is used only in the initial steps of soy food processing, and virtually all of it is eliminated by the time the soy ingredients are incorporated into soy burgers and other products. Testing by Swiss scientists found that the majority of vegetable oils sampled had no detectable levels, and those that did fell well below the tolerance limit set by the European Union. On the other hand, independent testing commissioned by the nonprofit Cornucopia Institute created a stir a couple years ago when it found hexane residues in soy oil, as well as in soy grits and soy meal. Since its report, several companies have switched to safer and more environmentally friendly, hexane-free soy protein ingredients. What to do? If you want to avoid hexane-treated soy foods, look for 100% organic products with the United States Department of Agriculture USDA seal, since hexane is banned in organic food production. And better yet, buy soy foods made with whole soybeans such as tofu, tempeh soy milk, and soy yogurt, since they do not typically undergo hexane processing and are generally healthier for you. Whole soybeans, edamame are also hexane-free and a healthy option. So again, Thomas is making it out to seem that hexane is in every soy food. It's in higher concentrations than in fish, when that's not the case. There are many soy foods that are low in hexane, contain absolutely no hexane at all. So if you are worried about hexane, then you can still consume soy safely with no problem without consuming any hexane. I was also able to find another article on this topic where they explain that just because certain foods go over the hexane limit, that's not a reason to exclude them from your diet, because no study yet has actually been able to determine what the upper limit of hexane intake should be. These are just precautionary limits. So if Thomas is going to claim that hexane is an issue with soy food consumption, then you are at least going to have to demonstrate like some type of link between soy consumption and some sort of disease or negative health outcome, which you haven't been able to do yet. So in summary, everything you said is absolute nonsense. You are a liar and a fraud, and no one should take you seriously. And if you like this video, maybe consider supporting me on Patreon or through my website. I have some funding perks you may find interesting. If you're looking for clothing, then check out the Vegan Gain store. And if you're looking for online coaching, then check out Quality Gains. He offers customized meal and training programs. And if you click the link in the description, you can get a free ebook. And don't forget to subscribe to my wife's OnlyFans. Her name is Fresh Warm Buns, and those buns are the warmest and freshest buns you will ever see. And as always, keep making those vegan and soy gains.
What a relief. When will this poisonous product cease? This is another public service announcement. You can believe it or you can doubt it. Let us begin now with the cow. The way it gets to your plate and how.